So one of the things when you're thinking about the energy justice framework, you're also thinking about where is let's say, the problem or the issue. So once you think about what's the issue, then you think about who are the people, you're thinking about where is the issue. And then the fourth step in the decision-making process is thinking about the time and the money. So what is the timeline for reform in this area? And, if we're thinking about energy justice issues, we're always thinking about the context of that problem. So, and that goes back to where is the issue? Let's say if it's a particular region, how is that region affected even by industry, business supply chains, and the difficulty of getting resources, whether they be human resources, into a particular region, increasing capacity, they are all issues, and we will reflect that in terms of the timeline for succeeding with energy justice.
En el programa de hoy hablaremos con el profesor Raphael Heffron sobre justicia energética, su evolución como teoría clave en el camino de la transición energética, su vínculo con los derechos humanos, los tipos de justicia energética, las oportunidades y riesgos que enfrentan los países en su implementación y puesta en marcha, y algunos ejemplos prácticos de cómo esta teoría ha venido siendo aplicada en los sectores minero-energéticos y su futuro. Bienvenidos.
Del Carbono al Watt, un podcast del Departamento de Derecho minero-energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia, dedicado a informar, aportar y discutir la transición y la justicia energética en Colombia y el mundo.
Acompáñenos de la mano de nuestros invitados a aclarar ideas, conceptos y discusiones sobre el futuro de la minería, el petróleo, la energía y su relación con la transición y la justicia energética.
Soy Juan Felipe Neira.
Soy Luis Bustos. Y bienvenidos a la tercera temporada de Del Carbono al Watt.
Traiga su libreta y comencemos.
Professor Raphael Heffron is professor in energy law, justice, the social contract and sustainability at the Université de Pau et des Pays de la Deux, France. He is a qualified barrister at law and graduate from both Oxford and Cambridge. His work has principal focus on achieving a sustainable and just transition to low-carbon economy and combine a mix of law, policy, and economics. He has just published over 200 publications of different types and is the most cited scholar in this field worldwide for energy law and energy justice in particular. He has been guest lecturer in more than 64 different countries around the world. Raphael, can you explain to us the concept of energy justice and the link that it has with the energy transition?
Yes, so very simply, the concept of energy justice is about trying to improve the protection of human rights across the energy life cycle. So from extraction through production, through operation and supply, through consumption, through to decommissioning and waste management. But when we think of the energy transition, we're thinking justice has a key role in that transition. And as we move towards a low-carbon economy, we want to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind and that all decision-making has an element of justice. And by that I include issues such as inclusiveness, equitable remedies, and fairness.
Raphael, according to this theory, energy justice has several types of categories, and they have been changing as a concept that has been growing through the time, right? Can you explain us a little bit or more about this type of categories?
Yeah, so generally, if we look at international policy, we look at international literature and even national and local literature, we see 5 key types of justice: procedural, distributive, recognition, restorative, and cosmopolitan. And if you're looking at these in, let's say, a more simple way, what you'd say is 3 of them, which are restorative, procedural, and distributive, they're about what is the key issue that you're discussing or that is a justice issue. And then if you're looking at recognition or cosmopolitan, you're asking the question, who is being affected? Is it a local community, an indigenous community? Is it a region of a country? Is it a country itself, such as a small island developing state?
How much of this concept is about the review mirror? How much is about looking what the energy sector has done in the past, and how much of it is of what can be done in the future?
Well, very much the energy justice framework is a forward-looking framework, and what you're trying to do is show when you're making new decisions in the energy sector, you want to make sure these, let's say, 5 principles are part of that. And a good example would be what's happening in the US at the moment, where the Department of Energy have said that if you want to access 62 billion worth of subsidies, you need to show how restorative, procedural, distributive and recognition justice are built into the project design. So before you get access to money, before you get your permit, you're showing that these forms of justice were part of your project design. So it's very much a forward-looking initiative. When we look back on the past, for me, that's really where you're thinking about environmental justice, you're thinking about climate justice, and you're trying to solve those legacy problems that we have in society.
Well, this concept of energy justice started as an academic concept and discussion, and if I'm not mistaken, it ended up in the inauguration speech of President Biden. So it's something that has grown substantially in the past few years. I don't think this has even a decade, and it's already a key element. And in this podcast, we have discussed many times that there's many ways to approach the energy transition. There's not a single formula or a magic formula, but different ideas. What I see from energy justice and the concept of energy justice is that it's a framework. It's a way to solve, to put problems and to find solutions. It's not the magic solution. Am I mistaken, or it is like that?
Well, you're correct in that it is a framework, and the idea is to guide someone towards making the best decision at a particular time. We all know that circumstances can change. There can be different contexts for different decisions. You know, if you're doing something in one area of a country, it can be different to another area. What utilizing the energy justice framework, you're essentially saying at this particular point in time, we have followed to the best of our ability this framework. And part of the idea of following that is you're reducing the risk of a particular action or a particular project, a particular activity in society. And by reducing the risk, you are therefore, let's say, creating opportunity. You're creating the opportunity for further investment in a country. You're creating the opportunity for lower finance. And if you have more investment, lower finance, you create more jobs. And that's why I would say, let's say, energy justice could be that magic solution.
In a recent text that you and Professor Luis de Fontiel edited that is called The Power of Energy Justice and the Social Contract, you imply the idea that there's a link between the implementation of energy justice and the social contract. Can you tell us more about it?
So maybe this also relates to the first question, and when we're thinking of the energy transition, that part of the issue when we're thinking of the energy transition is we're moving to, let's say, it's a new technology revolution. And the key point here is we don't want to leave anyone behind in this technology revolution. And we need to ensure that we understand what has happened in the past. Let's say we have these all these issues around carbon dioxide pollution, the other, let's say, greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide, methane. We know that the energy sector has contributed just over 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. But we also know, the energy sector is huge business in the world. It's around 10% of global GDP expenditure. So it's valuable to economies all over the world. And we also think one of the biggest reasons for economic instability is through not having access to secure energy supplies. So the energy sector really plays one of the most vital roles in our economies and even more broadly in our society. So we approach the problem of this importance of energy, but also the fact that energy has created many problems, that we need a new balance of the relationship between stakeholders for the energy sector. So we need to sit down again and think, as we have all these different technology choices today, how can we achieve a balance between the risk, the reward and the responsibility between government, companies and public citizens? And what we say in that point of view is, therefore, we need a new social contract in order to deliver the best energy transition possible for a particular country.
You already mentioned the example of the US, but what other examples do you have in developed countries of the use of the energy justice concept in policies, or more especially by companies?
Well, I suppose one of the other examples we are seeing being widely practiced now is around issues of restorative justice. And we are seeing a major push in both the developing world countries, to try and hold international multinationals to account and make them pay for the cleanup of their operations. And this, in essence, begins to draw to the attention of countries that actually fossil fuels are maybe not as cheap as people think they are, that actually there is a further cost, and it is the companies that should be paying that cost. And different activities, such as companies going bankrupt before they had to pay for cleanup, different types of these activities have been stopped. And we see a broader initiative, let's say, by the UN. The UN call, I think since last year, they call the next 10 years a decade of restoration. And the idea being that not just via the energy sector, but the energy sector is a prime example, but many other sectors of the economy, that there needs to be more focus on decommissioning and waste management, so that there is a realization that as we move in an energy transition, we need to make this problem of decommissioning waste management, let's say, less of a problem. So that will be one aspect on restorative justice. We also see in distributive justice, we see how many countries are trying to operate different types of energy markets for electricity. So they're trying to, in essence, lower the amount of money companies can make by having auction schemes for selling the electricity, essentially. And we see huge success. Two big success stories would be the UK for offshore wind, where they reduced the price by 80%, and also in India, where they reduced the price of solar energy by 80%. And in both cases, both countries were relying on buying the majority of the technology from other countries. So for me, that shows you don't have to be producing the technology in your own country. You can be buying it from abroad and actually achieving lower costs in your country. And essentially, you're lowering the profit margins of energy companies, and you're making clean energy affordable for more people.
That's an interesting view, because there's some debate, particularly in developing countries, about the energy transition, especially because for countries like Colombia and so many others in Latin America, a lot of our income comes from fossil fuels and raw materials. So if we don't have that option, and if we are forced to create other sources of wealth and income, that's going to take a while. So we're going to have a big hit in our economy if the transition is not made in the right way. How can we apply the energy justice framework or concept to a developing country that is in a situation like this one?
Well, I think when we think about that problem, we need to think that the energy transition is a journey. And it's not to say that every country is going to arrive at a particular point exactly at the same time. So when we think about the Paris Agreement, countries have agreed already to different targets for 2030 and even different targets for 2050. So we're thinking countries need to make that progress. And one way of doing that is to say okay, we need to transition away from fossil fuels, and we need not just new opportunities in energy, we need new opportunities in green energy across the rest of the economy. We also need to start focusing on where we can develop other areas of the economy. And in that way, you have the concept of energy justice linking in with the idea of a just transition. And for when you're thinking of that, you're still thinking of the different journeys. And one example of thinking about that would be to say, well, we may be at the moment relying a lot on revenue, let's say for oil and gas. I think producing raw materials is a different sector specifically to the energy sector. But if we're thinking of oil, gas, or even coal for some countries, we need to realize this is also a technology revolution where a country should also be thinking we don't have a choice about being left behind. We have seen from previous technology revolutions, there is that possibility of what economists call a Minsky moment where overnight, and let's say in terms of financial terms, we're talking 1-2 years, 3, overnight, you have a huge, massive drop in asset value. And when we think of energy justice and just transition, we're thinking you also need to factor in that type of pathway. So what does a country do to make sure it will not end up in that position? And if we look around the world today in terms of coal, and you look what happened to the coal industry since 2015 to 2023. In the US, for example, coal assets dropped in price by around 80%. People lost huge amounts of money. Right. Pension funds lost huge amount of money. No one's giving the money back to these, billionaires or pension funds, etc. But after that, you had the Chinese decision to pull out of coal projects anywhere in the world. So automatically, the insurance industry said, we don't want to insure coal projects. And if you're an investor, you're thinking today, coal is gone. It's on the way out very, very fast. What's next? And you're thinking, is it oil or gas? And to me, that would be the big worry, that a country keeps on a trajectory of relying on oil and gas or coal still in terms of transport or selling it to other countries, and thinking this situation where these oil or gas assets may drop in value significantly, we need to be ready for that. So we need to be thinking more broadly, how do we get more green jobs? How do we encourage other sectors of our economy to grow, whether that be tourism, manufacturing, service industry, agriculture, etc.?
I completely agree, and I think it is very important to diversify. However, creating a new sector, tourism or agriculture, takes at least a decade. Do we have a decade to do that?
I think we have a decade, but I also think things can actually happen much faster than we think. And this for me is crucial in that I think society today has become too risk averse. And we think when we introduce a new public policy, this public policy has to work. And there's no opportunity for saying, let's have 3 or 4 public policies on this issue and let's see which one works. And then once we know after 2 or 3 years, we fully target the one that works. Mm-hmm. And I think when we think about public policy in, let's say, in the whole type of green economy, we see from governments in both developed and developing world that they seem to think we make this choice, and if it doesn't work, then the green economy doesn't work in the manufacturing industry. What we should be thinking is, let's try 3 or 4 options and show the investment community we really want to make things work. Because if you look around, you see that this week, I think it was either last Friday or Monday, China announced that it's 5 years ahead of schedule on its low carbon energy ambitions. India, the example I gave earlier, they met their solar energy requirement, I think 3 or 4 years. They met it in 2018. They only created it in 2012. And I think they met their 2022 target in 2018. So they had to revise their target in 2018. And I think these show that if you have this clear objectives, but you don't just have one possibility. You're having 3, 4, 5 different policy objectives, and then you show the investment community we don't just have one option for you to invest. We have 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think as a society, if we took more risks, we could achieve our targets in less than 10 years.
Raphael, here at the podcast, we use a concept that claims that each country or region should adopt the energy transition to their reality, right? So we talk about the Colombian energy transition, the Peruvian energy transition, the Mexican energy transition, and their difference. Do you think that that will apply also to the energy justice?
Yeah, so one of the things when you're thinking about the energy justice framework, you're also thinking about where is the, let's say, the problem or the issue. So once you think about what's the issue, then you think about who are the people, you're thinking about where is the issue. And then the fourth step in the decision-making process is thinking about the time and the money. So what is the timeline for reform in this area? And, you know, if we're thinking about energy justice issues, we're always thinking about the context of that problem. So, and that goes back to where is the issue? Let's say if it's a particular region, how is that region affected even by industry, business supply chains, and the difficulty of getting resources, whether they be human resources, into a particular region, increasing capacity, you know, they are all issues. And we will reflect that in terms of the timeline for succeeding with energy justice.
Now, if you think about the goals, what's the next step? What's the evolution of this concept? What do you think about?
Well, I think the goal for energy justice essentially is already in place. And the goal is already in place in this concept that we call future-proofing. And the idea of future-proofing is where it has been around a lot in law, and people talked about future-proofing in many areas of law. But within energy, environment, climate change, international business, national business, sustainability issues, the UN came out with a big document in 2022 around future-proofing our infrastructure in general in society, but in a key way applying to energy infrastructure. And the idea of future-proofing is that at a particular time, you are getting all the information together. You are getting all the data together, all the, let's say if it's a particular region, all the qualitative data that you need for that region. If there are indigenous people there, how many people, you know, the income levels of different people, the poverty level, etc. And you make a decision with all that available information. And the idea is when you make that decision, whether you are in the government, whether you are in industry, whether you are leading a local community, you make that with all that information. And what we see then is that in future years, that person can be held accountable. And that person will no longer be able to hide behind the office that they hold, whether it be in government, whether it having been in a company, or whether it have been, you know, the leader of a local community. And we already see some early legal cases of holding people accountable, but holding them accountable beyond the office that they held. So it's a bit like in commercial law for many years in many countries across the world, you have the expression from common law, piercing the veil of these companies. You know, we know that the parent company is earning all the money and we are piercing the veil. And it's a bit similar, the same legal concept. We are piercing the office to say, we do live in 2023 and all this information is available to you today and you should be utilizing this to make the best decision possible, let's say in 2023 or whenever you make that decision.
But that same logic applied to policymakers also puts them into a corner, because then taking decisions on betting on not just one, the right policy, but 2 or 3 different policies is risky, don't you think?
For me, I wouldn't say so. For me, I would say it's about showing the thought process in your decision making. And it's about being more transparent and saying, here is all the evidence that we used. And let's say that's why the US example around the, let's say, putting justice into a project design, because they actually take the latest research and say, here are 5 academic sources, I think 4, one is more policy, but they say here are 4 academic sources and this is what we've based our view of justice on. And in a similar way, what we should see is decision makers saying, all this information is out there, how have we utilized it in our decision? And I'm not saying that they always have to be up to date with the very, very latest, but what you have to say is in July 2023, we should have this view. We do know that this problem is as a result of this problem. We do know, we have sought this information about the impact on public health in this region if this project goes ahead, etc., etc. And I think a crucial step when you mention policy choices is to also show what are the other options, what are the alternatives, because if people realize if we do not, let's say, go ahead and provide energy for this region, what will be the transition for this region in the next 5 or 10 years? So it's about giving people that they understand there are numerous pathways, but in order to be on these different pathways, here are 5 or 6 options to get us on the pathway. And if there's no action, then these are other pathways we will end up on. Because I think when we look at the world today, after COVID, after the economic crisis, after the increasing effects of climate change, I think everyone is in agreement that something has to happen in order for us to have a low carbon economy that is more balanced and, there's better income distribution, there's economic growth, and, society can move forward in a better way than it has been, let's say, for the last, in particular, let's say 10, 20 years.
Well, now I'm going to ask you to bring your crystal ball. And
Once again.
And if you could bet on 3 or 4 technologies that will be key for energy justice around the world, which ones would you pick?
The ones I would pick would be, firstly, better battery storage, and I would say even personalized battery storage, and all the associated technologies with battery storage. Linked to that would be solar energy, so such as having a solar panel that you can take off your apartment window, you can place onto your car when you drive. And for me, I think if you have those 2 options, you have artificial intelligent technology that can, let's say, learn your behavior. Even if you're using your computer at home, it's learning your behavior, it's charging it at different points in time. And also maybe cheaper, electric cars, which I think if we look to China, they probably will provide a big rival for Tesla very soon. But I think if I was picking 4, it would be those 4. I think we are already seeing improvements in battery and solar energy. There is opposition to it because what happens when you have your own personal solar and battery technology, it means you won't buy electricity anymore. In many countries, who owns the electricity companies? The government, or very influential international energy companies. They don't want people having their own access to energy because they'll be out of business in the morning. But that technology is coming. I think if you look at electric cars, you look at the price of Tesla in the stock market today, it's worth more than the 10 biggest car companies in the world. And that's a sign that people are betting not on Tesla as a electric car company. They're betting on Tesla to be able to utilize the batteries in a whole series of ways. They're betting on Tesla being able to utilize the efficient technology that they have put into the car itself in a whole variety of ways that can be for our household goods, etc., etc. So I think there is a big chance for these 4 technology sources to be transformative. And I would just finish with an example which was given at a lecture I attended maybe 10 years ago. And it was from Stephen Chu, who was the former Secretary for Energy in the US. He was also a former Nobel Prize winner. And when he was in California, they showed that they, let's say, debunked a few myths of what we think of energy and the cost of energy. And they wanted to make white goods, so our refrigerators, washing machines, they wanted to make them more energy efficient. And it was essentially the law and the policy people who said, we want you to hit this target in 3 years. The engineers said, it can't be done. The economists said, if you do that, you will price out white goods from the majority of consumers, and we'll end up with a lot of people unable to afford white goods. So they will be in a sort of poverty in terms of those types of goods. And the policymakers and the lawyers stuck to their decision and said, you have 3 years. And what happened in the space of 3 years? The engineers exceeded the energy efficiency standards that they were set, and they actually also lowered the price of white goods. So automatically it shows if we set targets and we insist on those targets being met, we could actually achieve change far faster than we think.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Professor Raphael, for joining us here at Del Carbono al Watt.
It's a pleasure to have one of the founding fathers of energy justice with us, and it's going to be a delight for our audience to hear directly from you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
Y para que lo apunte en su libreta,
El recomendado de nuestro invitado es.
Okay, so for a recommendation, I have a couple of recommendations to give. Firstly, I would say for anyone interested in thinking about the level of ambition that we need to, let's say, to move forward with this energy transition, to move forward with, let's say, trying to achieve the change we need around climate change, economic inequality. And if you listen to the podcast where I'm speaking, that I think it relates to one of the key messages that we always have to be wary, flexible to change. And I would like to advise, my recommendation would be to watch a film that could be close to many people's hearts. And the film is called Hunger. And it's a lot about food, so I think we can all resonate that all of us enjoy eating. But the film covers issues of food, but also ambition. And also if we leave ambition in society unchecked. So I think in many ways for me it mirrors the, let's say, the energy sector as it currently stands. But also for me, why I recommend it is the energy sector is a fascinating industry for us all to work on. It is very complex. It provides us with new challenges every couple of years, understanding technology, law, policy, economics, psychology, sociology, etc. And I think when we also think about food, we all have those same experiences about enjoying food in different ways, experiencing new food. So I'd encourage you to go out there and watch that film called Hunger.
Aquí termina Del Carbono al Watt.
Síguenos en Spreaker, Spotify y Apple Podcast.
También disponible en las redes del Departamento de Derecho minero-energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia. Del Carbono al Watt es un podcast original del Departamento de Derecho minero-energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia.
Producción general, Luis Bustos y Juan Felipe Neira.
Productor técnico, Ancísar Aponte y la Facultad de Comunicación Social de la Universidad Externado de Colombia.
Musicalización, Pixabay. Gracias por seguirnos.